Some of you who've been part of the St. James's community for a bit longer might remember that some years ago during Lent here, we ran a Lent course with a difference. We were extremely pleased with ourselves with the title we gave it, which almost overshadowed the actual programme, but anyway, we called it Loitering Within Lent. And together, we went physically to some places in society that we thought would provoke us to reflect on the practice of our faith in the world, unfamiliar places, to practice curiosity and open-mindedness. They were, for many who took part, unfamiliar places, as I said, where we might have been out of our comfort zones. We went to the public gallery of the Old Bailey to witness a day of a murder trial. We visited a TV studio for the recording of a daytime TV show. We went to the fantastic Neasden Temple. And one of the weeks we did, with the help of a guide, an exercise called Street Wisdom. Over 3 hours, we gathered here at the church and then went individually, increasingly slowly, on 3 walks, deliberately without destination, but with some prompts and questions. Traveling on our feet with sticks on wheels, it didn't matter. We were building up our practice. The first walk was 10 minutes, the second 20 minutes, the third almost an hour. We then came back to share together how it had been and what had happened. Attentiveness to the street, slow travel, with a deliberate open-heartedness and open-mindedness was, for many people, quietly transformational. With only a mysterious question to accompany us. One was, follow the story. Some found themselves out and about, overhearing conversations, noticing colours or signs or impressions they'd never seen before. And somehow, by the practice of slow curiosity, found a mechanism for pondering, exploring, wandering, wondering, that's often inaccessible in an ordinary day. The founder of Street Wisdom writes this: "We found, after many years of exploring, answers are everywhere. In a world that feels increasingly overwhelming, Street Wisdom offers something beautifully counterintuitive. The answer to your toughest question might be waiting on a street corner you've never noticed." As I mentioned last week at Evensong, we are going to need every one of these 50 days of Easter, every one of them, to wander through the resurrection Gospels, be curious about their strange events and energetic transformations, and bear witness to this movement from fearful, locked doors, going back to work or home, the movement from all of that to the wonder, the wonder-filled, open-eyed astonishment that characterizes the gentle presence of Christ, risen from the dead, not high up and far away, giving instructions through a megaphone from heaven, but integral, alongside, at breakfast, in the early morning garden, and here in today's resurrection gospel, on the road, towards the evening, drawing alongside 2 whose hopes of a better world had been destroyed by the violence and distress of Good Friday. Emmaus is around 7.5 miles from Jerusalem, maybe 2 or 3 hours walk. What's really interesting about this story is that the implications of the life, death, and life of Jesus were slow to sink in with these disciples. These 2 had already heard the rumor from the women, they said, that somehow the tomb had been found empty, and there was some talk of him being alive. Despite this news, the 2 of them, when asked what they'd been discussing, stood still looking sad, we hear. These 2 are patron saints of dawning realization. They're not like Thomas, who demands proof, or Peter, who has to be reminded of the worst thing he ever did, and then preaches, as we heard today, so that people were cut to the heart. They're not like Mary Magdalene, who bravely tells a whole community who don't believe her the new truth she's found. These 2 have the whole picture, but they can't yet see it. They decide to go home and let it all sink in. One of them has a name. Cleopas could be the same person as Clopas, who by tradition was the brother of Joseph, so Jesus' uncle. The other disciple is not named. The note that they strike in this gospel is that of regret. Cleopas says, we'd hoped, but it didn't happen, so we're going home. But the story goes that this stranger draws alongside them, walks along with them, doesn't start lecturing, but in a humorous exchange, asks more questions. "What are you talking about?" he says. They stood still and looked sad. "Are you the only person in Jerusalem who doesn't know the news everyone is talking about?" And then the gentle joke Jesus says, knowing full well, of course, what news? Gets them to say what they think has happened. They need to talk it out. They need to get it all in order. This encounter on the road to Emmaus is full of light, full of humor, joy, a sort of no, really sense that life is so much more than we thought, so much more possibility than we can imagine. Yesterday, I went to see an art exhibition in Vauxhall, and one of the pieces made me think of the gospel for today. A young artist, Gus, in his piece, Footnotes, had set himself some rules for some walks around London, deliberately with no destination in mind. Following the French 1960s practice of a group of artists who explored the artistic practice of dérive, wandering, following this practice, the intention he wanted was deliberately to construct situations in which he submitted to his personal intuition, trying to remain free of concerns about the control he might have about weather or time. By placing constraints, for example, intentionally walking around a location that was unfamiliar, he encouraged himself to pay attention, but also had a rule, don't glare. This artist was exploring, paradoxically, by placing constraint, the unrestrained encounter with the present moment. Although this dérive practice is secular and the street wisdom practice is spiritual, they have something in common that resonates with the practice of resurrection faith. The 50 days of Easter are here for us to walk within the constraints of our own lives, time and place, to discover the unfettered freedom of God who walks beside us. With these Emmaus disciples to join the chorus of dawning realization that our Christian faith is not primarily about us making sure each of us is safe to be able to go to heaven when we die, but that the thrust of the gospel is that it's our, as the Eucharistic prayer says, our duty and our joy to recognize and encounter the living, lively presence of God now. The point of Christian faith, resurrection faith, isn't pie in the sky when you die, but eternity in a wild flower now. To know and be known by the unfamiliar God. Resurrection isn't a happy ending to a sad story. It's what there is on the other side of nothing, every moment of every hour of every day. Resurrection upends every assumption about the progress of time, the inevitability of decay, the inexorable route march to destruction, followed in a linear sense by that eternal division between hell and heaven that frightens us sufficiently to make us go to church in this life. Banish this trajectory, this pattern of believing. It's stale. We are looking for the risen Christ when we really follow that path. We're looking for the risen Christ in the doctrines and places of the dead. The pattern, the paschal rhythm of life, death, life, the imprint of Jesus of Nazareth, always and forever, the cosmic Christ present in all creation. This takes us by the hand and leads us up to the open-eyed wonder that God is in the unutterable joy of living in eternity. And the Easter Gospel insists that this is true, even and especially in the ongoing crucifixions that the world insists on. Ongoing crucifixions today, fueled by fear, and in our own day, a series of bellicose spikes of dysregulated warmongering. The resurrection gospel breaks into this reality, infuses and irrigates the church with strange joy. If Jesus of Nazareth could become a familiar, if fundamentally challenging, but too familiar presence, recognizable even at centuries' distance, then the risen Christ is God made strange. And so for us as a community of resurrection, for that's what the church must be, a community of resurrection, we accept that one of our spiritual disciplines is to defamiliarize ourselves with stories we might know well, characters we might feel connected to, and most especially patterns of spiritual practice and belief that we have become stuck in. Defamiliarize yourself with the gospel you think you know. Let us allow in our own minds for God to become strange again, a strange joy that makes no sense. Let our Easter prayer be in deep trust. Your ways are not my ways, and your thoughts are not my thoughts. Teach me your ways. Christ risen from the dead is coterminous with the void of the tomb. The empty tomb and the confusion and the terror that goes along with it, alongside the encounter with this stranger we heard in our gospel today, an unrecognizable face, an unfamiliar presence that walks us up to the breaking of this bread where we are known and where we know. This breaking of bread that leads to such energy that we're able to return to Jerusalem or wherever it is for us that is our place of crucifixion and fear. We are able to return, fueled by this food for our journey, to live out, even in the middle of the city, the resurrection gospel that faces our regret, what we had hoped for, and schools us to reimagine what our hope for the future might be. Before Easter was a doctrine or a belief, it was simply contact. Encounter with strange joy, inexplicable hope, against the odds, even when the seeds of that hope have already been given and we haven't been able to accept that they've already been planted in our hearts. Habitually, as human beings, our hope is too small, too limited. Half the time we don't even know what to hope for. We define and confine so that we're not too disappointed. A natural and understandable principle for life in the world, but not one that takes account of the risen Christ who walks alongside us on the road. And so let us practice street wisdom, defamiliarize ourselves with the gospel we think we know, pray to be shown how our God made strange sees us, energizes us, and importantly calls us as a community of resurrection persistently and fearlessly to proclaim hope we had not imagined was possible, even and especially in the contemporary Good Friday suffering of these days. Amen.